Hello, hello. I am back today, and we are talking about the top 15 struggles that as women we are still overcoming. And these are feminine collective wounds, which what that means is it's not just you, babe. We all as women are either encountered these or are still encountering these in different layers. And I think that's so important to know right up front is that this is not something that you are alone in experiencing. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or that you are less than or um, in any way because you're experiencing these. And I think that's something really common that as women, we might think that we're alone in that or that other women aren't experiencing these, especially if we're seeing other women being very successful in their careers or even within their families of having children or being a mother, uh, or women who are making bold moves and already have that success. We think that they don't experience that, and that just simply isn't the case. It doesn't matter who you are as a woman because of our history and because collectively what we've evolved, how we've evolved, these are things that are still coming up for us and things that really is our responsibility to continue overcoming so that we can change that for future generations and that we can become the best version of ourselves and really enjoy our lives now. Uh, Before we dive in, my name is Audra Coons, and I am a therapist as well as a life coach and mentor for women. And I am super passionate about empowering women and speaking about um, these concerns openly so that we really can overcome them and really take away the stigma that these things come up. As I mentioned, they can come up in layers. And so these are things that I am continuing to work through as I help my clients work through those and within my friends and social support that I have. I'm also talking to other women that are dealing with these things as well. And so, um, let's just cut through any shame around these and have an open dialogue. These topics can certainly be heavy, or sometimes they can bring up different things. So just really be tender with yourself and try to remain open as I talk through each of these. As I mentioned, we do have 15, so this may be a little longer video than some of my last ones, but I'm super excited to dive in. So, number one is taking up space. And so, what do I mean by this? Just even the space that we're existing in. So, this can look a few different ways. And so, what I've noticed is even as we're just kind of walking through maybe a store or through somewhere in public, how much space we're allowing ourselves to take up. And so, this can look like, maybe somebody is walking, down the aisle and we're quick to get out of the way, like, oh my gosh, and I'm so sorry. The constant apologizing or quit, let me just get out the way as if I'm a burden just being here. Um, Another way that this comes up is just looking down, not being able to make eye contact, really not respecting and honoring that we're a person and we're just as worthy as taking up space as any other human. Um, and so just kind of, this, you can be mindful about this and see how does this show up for me? Is this something I allow myself space to share my opinion or to just simply exist walking through a public area or a store or etc. Number two is the good girl, nice girl syndrome. So we're all probably a little familiar with this. We've probably heard this term and maybe even noticed this already in ourselves of really wanting to be overly accommodating and overly nice, really afraid to ruffle any feathers, feeling uncomfortable if somebody is upset with what we've said or anything that we're doing at all. And so this really shows up in a couple of ways. And so one of them is that people pleasing mode. And so again, that you also hear it as that nice girl syndrome. So it's just kind of being so concerned about everyone else and pleasing um, everyone else that uh, we're not allowing ourselves to even be part of the conversation, or we're remaining really passive and not speaking up or not sharing things, which, as you can see, these are all really interconnected, and that is also taking up space. And what we know about this, and really with all of these, but I'm going to mention it here on the good girl syndrome, is that this is a survival mechanism. This is a protective strategy that we have learned and evolved from, you know, historically, when we really did not have the same rights as men, or we were not viewed in that way where our opinions were valued the same, right? And so many would, argue, and there's plenty of debate about where we're at in history now with this, where we have come a long way, right? And we have more rights and ability now than we ever have, right? And we're actually seeing where more women are rising into leadership roles, or, we're the highest, we have a higher rate of being in universities and education than men right now. And so there's a lot of different things, without going too far into that, recognizing that we now is our time, right? And so it's really time to step out of saying we don't have those rights, or continuing to um, really blame men. And that might tick some people off, but continuing to blame men in our history for these things, and instead really meeting ourselves so that we can work through them and that we can overcome them, and decide we're going to do that for ourselves, and let others see that, right? And they will follow, right? And they will, we will be valued as we value ourselves. So, number three is activating our voice. And so, um, really being able to speak and value our opinion, and speak in a way that we're able to articulate our thoughts. And so we often see this, whether this is, again, not speaking up and speaking our opinions, it's also in how we convey our message. Right. And so this is something I'm continuing to work on how we speak. Right. So you'll notice, whether it's listening to me right now, or, notice within yourself, and as you're having conversations with other women, how many words we use, right? And specifically the filler words that we use, such as, like this, uh, over explaining. And so really being mindful of that, and just recognizing the root of where that comes from. So, right, if we're not valuing our voice, or we haven't historically, we that is where the tendency comes in to be over explaining, or, right, showing that we have worth by telling everybody everything. And so there's a few, different ways, depending on where you're at, to look at what this is, and as I'm talking, listen to me, right? We um, need to continue strengthening our voice so that we're able to speak concisely and clearly. And that's really so that our message can be heard, and also to understand the differences in how even men and women use language. So we actually know that women use 3 times as many words as men, and men use around 7,000 words a day, and women are closer to 21,000. And so that is enough information right there. And so um, this is also to help us be heard and understood, right? And so it's not that our men, or, they don't want to listen to us. They are going to process the information differently. And so you can all, think about when you've been in a room full of women and you're having conversations. There's, everyone's speaking over everyone, and there's 10 conversations going on at once and that seems fine, which that's another conversation that can actually stimulate us and kind of arouse our nervous system too much. But just in general, we can also get really excited and thrive on that, where that is simply overwhelming to men, right? It's not processing the same in their brain. And so that is why, right? And so there's places that we can kind of get in that energy, but there's also spaces, particularly if we're wanting to excel in leadership roles or to really be seen or heard in the value that we have to bring, we need to practice how we speak and how we're activating our voice. And so, number four is how we perpetuate that being inferior from our history through self oppression. And so, what do I mean by that? We can notice a tendency sometimes to neglect our own needs, to potentially betray or abandon ourselves in an effort to take care of the people that we love or to, you know, take care of what we're, the things that we're doing in our lives. And so, this is really about recognizing that our needs are not only valuable and deserve tending to, that actually influences how well we are able to show up for the people that we care about and the causes and things that we care about. So with this one is looking at how you care for yourself, how you speak to yourself. Again, the space that we allow ourselves. What we even allow ourselves to receive. And so just looking at how you're viewing yourself. And in one of my other videos, I talked some about being like selfless. This is another version of this, right? So if we're so selfless that our self has been taken out of the equation and we're neglecting the things that we need, and we're trying to give and nurture and show up. Um, from a place like from an empty cup, right? Instead of filling our cup, knowing that that is what we're also bringing to everyone else. And so, really making sure that we're not continuing that with internally or within ourselves, um, and thinking it's still coming from outside of ourselves. We certainly have a history of that, but really recognizing how much are you doing that to yourself now, and that's a pattern and cycle that we really need to be intentional about and consciously aware of in order to change. And so, number five, you can see I've just got my notes over here, is reclaiming our personal power, our agency, our self authority. And so, what this really means is being our own leader, right? Being able to lead ourselves, give ourselves permission to do what we want to do or be ourselves, right? And this can look like waiting for other people to, waiting for somebody else to step up and allow that, to give us the permission or say, yes, that's a great idea. I think you should do that. Instead of validating ourselves and saying, I'm going to lead myself there. And that's a big one. Right. And that one, this one kind of encompasses all these other ones that I'm talking about. If we're able to activate that authority within ourselves and recognize the value that we have to bring, then that's going to change all these things. Right. So it starts with giving yourself permission and leading yourself through. So, number six is emotional overload. So, really recognizing um, the emotions that are coming up for us and knowing how to deal with them, right? How to process or work through them, and so that we're not leading with that, and it's not bleeding into everything that we're doing, right? And it's not about saying, a lot of times women, we get upset like you're being too emotional, right? That can really trigger us and get us really upset, right? I know I've certainly been there, and sometimes that's hard to hear, but really recognizing we often as women are carrying an overload of emotions, or as one of my mentors likes to say, we're not current. And so we might be carrying the emotions that's from baggage from things that have happened, or how we viewed our experiences, or even reflecting on the history of women and the rights that we didn't always have. And so, really being able to recognize that and know everybody has emotions, and it's important to know what to do with them, how to process them so that they're not really getting in the way and taking over our life. And so, within that, there's a few um, specifically that I wanted to touch on, which is the first one is shame. And so this is such a huge and heavy one that continues on if we are silent about it. And so, even just naming it and speaking about it is a first step to alleviating that. And so, what is shame? It is um, and actually, I should have really started with guilt. If we think about guilt, it's we are feeling bad about something we've done or not done. And so we'll come back to shame, but with guilt, you know, as women, we often feel really guilty if we're not able, to be there for everyone, or, right, especially like this is a huge one for moms of never feeling like they're doing enough, right? And so that guilt is thinking that I've done something wrong, or um, something that I haven't done, right? Where the difference with shame is it's not about something that I did or didn't do, as in my behavior, it's specifically me. So feeling as though I am bad, I am a bad person, or, right, it goes further into the core. And that's why it can be so heavy. And so the more that we are silent, or we let that continue, it just grows. And so the more that we are able to name that and release that, um, recognizing that we're not bad, and really tying that to our worth, that's how we can start to let go of some of that and break some of that up. That could be a whole topic on its own, but just to name that and recognize that is a huge one for us as women. And another one is unresolved anger and rage. This one is, right, really taboo to bring up, in that as women, we've been taught, right, again, that nice girl syndrome, we shouldn't show any of that. We, being hostile or angry or aggressive, that those are not attractive traits. Those are not traits that, any of us really actually like to deal with, no matter who we are, man or woman, or otherwise. And where it's something that women are still holding a lot. And so recognizing any resentments that you might be carrying, or things, right, that's feeling like I've been wronged, whether that's again looking at our history or specifically within your specific experiences, but recognizing that the more that we hold on to that, it actually is chipping away at our hearts, our essence, ourselves, right? And so it's not only it's not really affecting the change that we want by holding on to that. It's actually making us sick, and it's not helping anyone else, that we're caring for, that we love, or any of those things either. Another one is anxiety and worry that can come up a lot, um, where really kind of feeling um, really concerned about the future, that fear that comes up. What if this happens? Really feeling uneasy, which again is also related to like that feeling, that loss of feeling like we're out of control, or we don't have control, which, if we think again about our history, not having rights, at one point we didn't have that. And so this is something that has continued in generations of us. Um, feeling like we don't have that control. So the more that we develop that self authority and recognizing that we do have that agency, we do have that ability to make our own decisions and to lead our own lives, then that's going to help with the anxiety or worry that can come up, or even the tendency to control our situations or control things that feel, out of our control. So, number 7 is being attuned to our bodies and our cycles. And so, really recognizing what our bodies are telling us, recognizing that that is information. And so, if we have been really living up in our minds of just kind of that overthinking, continually trying to hustle and grind and just think our way through it, we're essentially kind of cutting off that information that is in our body, right? That intelligence that we have through our senses, through our heart, and ongoing, and so forth. I could talk about that as well for a while, but just that attuning to what our body is telling us, right? If we're stuck in emotional overload, this could look the same way, in that we're so kind of drowning in the emotions that we're also cutting ourselves off from, our bodies, or we're, in that sense, we might be cutting ourselves off from using some of the logic and reasoning that we have access to within our mind. So, depending on who you are, where you're at, that can look a little differently, but often the women that I'm working with um, are getting stuck in overthinking. They're stuck too much in the mind, and they need to really start accessing their bodies. In addition to this, we can talk about really, being attuned with our cycles, so our menstrual cycle. And this is something, right? Birth control has been, that's something that most women I know have been on or are currently on. I know that's something that I took for several years, and it was a process for me to be able to transition off of that and alleviate the PMS symptoms that I was experiencing. I'm sure I'll do another video on that. That's another story that I have, that I've experienced, but just recognizing that um, we are not as attuned with our cycles, whether that's just kind of pushing through of like, often we are seeing it or have been taught that it's kind of a burden, or this is like a curse, um, or just simply that we, are on some type of birth control or IUD, which is something that allowed us not to have to maybe worry about it so much, or not to be, allowing us to work and do the things that we want to do. But in turn, uh, it can separate us or kind of disconnect ourselves from our bodies and our cycles. And so within our menstrual cycle, it's natural that we have different rhythms and that we're going to need different things at different times, right? And the more that we're in tune with that and we're in tune with our bodies, it doesn't have to be something that's taking over. It doesn't have to be something where we need to be on rest for a week, because I think that's a fear that a lot of women have, is that, um, you know, they're seeing it as that burden. And then, like, well, if I allow that, like, I'm going to be down for a week or two. Or maybe that has been your experience because you do have some of these symptoms. And it's scary to think, like, that's even where some of the anger comes up, that I have to go and work and I can't take off time, for that. And so there's just a lot of stories and a lot of emotions that can come with that. But recognizing the more that we are in tune with those cycles, that we honor and respect our bodies and start to really know our own unique rhythm, then we can start working with that and just have a much easier experience and be more pleasant to be around, be more pleasant to be with ourselves, and ultimately be able to continue doing all the things we're doing without that being a concern, right? And so, like I said, that's something else I could talk more on, but just starting to recognize that our bodies have information for us. So number 8 is kind of leading, extending off of that one, is accepting and loving our bodies. And so we know how many of us have, are not happy with our bodies, right? Whether that's, I think I'm fat, I need to lose weight. We're upset about the dieting industry, or um, we find ourselves overeating or snacking on things, which can also lead all the way to binge eating, right? And so, actually, as a therapist, in the last 6 years, I um, have worked very exclusively with women with disordered eating, different forms of eating disorders. And actually, really, the last 9 years, that's been something that I've been working with, but more so as I went into my own practice. And this is such a big one, right? And whether that's something that's really debilitating you, or more so, there's plenty of women who are functioning and they're, able to live their lives, but they are still struggling with overeating and body shaming themselves. And so, again, this is really about, it starts with us, right? And so we can be angry about the dieting industry, we can whatever, but we need to recognize that that's not helping us really overcome it. And so we need to be aware, and that way we can be intentional about how we engage with different programs, how we engage with different products or advertisements or different things we're seeing out there, but recognizing that this really is a collective feminine wound, and that we can overcome it. So that's just something, in my journey, it's been over a decade, probably closer to a decade and a half, since that was something that was really affecting me, and something, behaviors that I was engaging in. And I'm telling you that because it is something that doesn't have to rule your life, and something you don't have to live with forever. It does take intention and support and different things to get there. But just even knowing that this is something that many, many women have faced, or are facing, and really even how that loops into everything else I'm talking about. And so, the less that we are filling up our cup, we are, again, valuing ourselves and taking care of ourselves, and the needs that we have, which are going to be different from men, and are going to be unique. We're each going to have unique things, but recognizing that filling up instead of emptying out is actually what we need to be doing. And so, if you think about the behavior of overeating or binge eating, we're trying to fill up. It's often stuffing ourselves. And so that may be an indicator that you're running on empty, right? And or we're dissatisfied. We're not really, um, you know, we're not getting the things that we need. And so we're turning to that as a way to escape or cope, in those moments. And so I definitely will, be talking more about that specifically with eating, and accepting our bodies and loving ourselves more. But for now, just recognizing kind of how that ties into all these other ones. So number 9 is being visible, being seen. And so this can show up in a lot of different ways, whether that's being seen and visible within your career and work, and stepping up into that role. Specifically, a lot of the women that I'm working with are in leadership roles, they're in executive leadership roles, or they are on that trajectory. This is one that is going to show up, and you're going to need to address to continue to be seen. This is also something that shows up in our relationships. And so, even being able to, right, that can feel really vulnerable for women. And so, depending on your relationship history, um, eh, you know, how comfortable you may feel, or whether that you're dating or you're already married, you're in a relationship, but really being able to be seen in our true essence. So, really, like, what's in our hearts, our passion, like, really, as a woman. Uh, I'll get a little bit more into this in the next one, but uh, just being okay being seen, because that can feel really scary. and it can feel uncomfortable. And again, this comes in layers. And you may notice that this shows up more in one area or the other. So, some women may have this more difficulty within their relationship and they're thriving at work, where it may be the opposite in that this is something that shows up more within business or your career, and you feel very safe and comfortable within your marriage or relationship. It can show up in both, but just recognizing that, and with any of these, you may have more challenges or struggles in one area or the other. Which leads me, this one can kind of lead into the next one. Number 10 is not owning our passions and desires. And so when I say our passion or desires, this is really what is in your heart. What do you really, really care about? What would bring harmony and satisfaction to your life? Uh, what change do you want to see for humanity, for your family, for your community, for yourself, right? So this is on different layers depending on what that is for you, but really owning that that's important to you. And sometimes we've completely shut this off. Sometimes are, we know what those are, but we're talking ourselves out of what that is. Or we're, not, don't feel like we're able to show that, be seen in what those are, because um, that feels risky. It's kind of, it's touching on that survival instinct again. It brings, excuse me, it brings all of that up. And so, really just thinking about what we're passionate about and what our true desires are. And this is not superficial wants or trivial things, right? But really deep down, what we value and what we care about. This one leads me again into number 11, which is pleasure and play. And so, the playfulness that is really inherent to our feminine essence, right? And I say feminine essence is not, this is not just females, so it doesn't, regardless of gender, um, we all have that feminine, that playfulness that we need, where as women, this is something that really affects if we're really living in our essence and we're feeling good and our radiance, or if we're really, feeling like down, we're feeling closed off, we're kind of just feeling like dead inside. We're not as alive, right? That, so that playfulness, that pleasure, that makes us feel alive, right? That's what brings that radiance from the inside out, right? And so, just inviting you to consider how often you think about pleasure or play. And I remember, I think it was about 4 years ago. I was really, I had started I was kind of in my therapy practice. I was really wanting to expand on that and, um, really learning how to build a business and really continuing to expand my therapy skills. And I was just so stuck in, getting there and figuring this out. And at some point, I realized I had lost some of the play and the pleasure and the like my husband always says, life is not so, we don't have to take it so seriously. And as a really driven, passionate woman, sometimes I can uh, take things a little seriously. And so really being able to remember that pleasure and play. But as I was telling you the story, it was about 4 years ago, I was listening to a podcast, and this woman that was speaking brought up pleasure. um, that was the whole topic of her podcast episode. And she was just in this very fun and juicy energy and just really feeling alive. And I remember at first kind of like, what is, what's this lady on? What's so great? What's so, like, I was in such a different headspace, right? Headspace versus heart space. And but something, right, said, like, I listened to this, and I was able to really realize some of that had been sucked out of my life, I had allowed some of that out. And I not only wasn't enjoying my life as much, but like, right, wasn't as enjoyable to be around. Right. And that was something that felt hard to admit at first, especially like when I'm now back in, in the place that I am now and kind of recognizing my natural state, that's the feminine essence is being in playfulness. Right. And so I'm so thankful that to that woman who was putting that information out and to myself that I listened and continued to sprinkle that in until it could grow and grow and grow and more, and really balancing out the drive that I have for my work, as a lot of the clients that I work with have, and a lot of you who will be watching this have, and with that playful, fun, energy. And so it's really about bringing those together. So number 12 is this is oh, no, we've got a few more. So, number 12 is the sisterhood wound, which is really about how we have evolved to really feel like we're in competition with other women and really feeling how jealousy can come up and how we kind of feel like if one woman has something, then I can't, right? Like she took all of it and right or she's that woman got the good man and she's married, so there's no good man out there for me, right? And that's a big thing that's happening right now is that um right, there's a lot of hate on men and a lot of talk about there's not any good men. And this definitely, that could be a whole topic too. And we're not saying that there aren't men out there that we need to be aware of that don't have our best interest, at hand, but or in mind, but that this idea or this way of thinking that we've developed over time that if one person has something or one woman has something, then I can't have it. Right. And the reality is that there is enough for all of us. Right. And actually one woman, um, you know, doing something or being in her pleasure or play or whatever that is inspiration that if she can do it, I can do it. And so that can be a big paradigm shift to recognize that, there's enough to go around for all. And if we think about again, the survival instinct that we have, um, when we go into that state, it's a state that there's not enough, right? That there's not enough. And so that's how we can get into this competition mode. And it really thinking about how we've evolved, that was something, in older days that women would, manipulate men, so that they could be the one, right? And it was all about really getting, a mate in older days that really helped us survive, right? We may have needed that in order to, in order to stay alive. And so just the things that, we no longer need to do, and we need to recognize that we need to grow out of that instead of talking bad about other women or thinking that who does she think she is? She's doing that, or feeling jealous that she's got something I don't. Really coming back to a place of collaboration, of recognizing that's inspiration. And if one woman is rising, then the next woman can too. And so I invite you today to use that as inspiration. And just, you know, again, we don't need to feel shame when that comes up, but recognizing what it is and then learning the skills and tools to be able to work through that and essentially transmute that into the inspiration, into that I get to have that too. Number 13 is accessing our feminine gifts. And so, again, when I say feminine, this is everyone has feminine and masculine energy and traits. And so, this is everybody's going to have that. Whereas women who are feminine, who at our core, in essence, we are, we relate to that. There are some of these that we don't realize are really strong strengths for us. And so feminine gifts include things like our intuition, right? Our feminine intelligence and knowing, specifically around relationships, around the ability to be nurturing and empathetic, and some of those traits that just come natural to us. And if, you know, this is going to show up differently for, each woman, where a lot of the women that I work with they do resonate and relate to those things, those traits, and um, being able to really harness those and strengthen those are gifts, right? And so another one is being able to receive. Excuse me. And so, even allowing ourselves to be cared for, not because we can't take care of ourselves, but because that's something that we can allow into our life that again fills our cup. And it feels good, and it allows us then to naturally give back, right? Like we want to be giving, but being able to receive. And so this could be a simple, I had a conversation last week with a client of even how allowing her husband to take in the groceries that she had went and gathered, she had went and brought them home, and he came out and grabbed all the groceries. And the tendency we can have to like, oh no, I've got it, or to continue helping instead of just allowing him to help, right? Yeah, that was, you did one part, and then allowing him to do another part. And when we're not able to do this, we may be stuck in a very much that independent mode, which I totally get, because it's not about being desperate or needing this, or not being capable of doing something, but it's about allowing help and support into our lives, and allowing ourselves to recognize that we do have a deep desire to be cared for. And it's okay to admit that. That doesn't make us weak. Um, it's just something that can feel really good um, for our female body, our female nervous system, and our hearts, right? So um, that one will, we could again go into all of these in great detail, but we'll leave it at that for now. And so number 14 is owning our multidimensionality. And so what this really means is all the different um, traits and states and flavors, as one of my mentors likes to call it, all the different parts of ourself, right? And so we may have learned or kind of conditioned ourselves to think that we can only be one thing or the other. So we're either pretty or we're smart. We can't be both, right? Or I'm either going to have a family and be a mom, or I'm going to be an independent career boss babe woman, right? And recognizing that we have different, like we can be both of those things. We can want both of those things. And those may show up in different seasons of our life. Or right, depending on what we're doing, we're accessing more of that, right? So as I'm coming to you with this information, accessing more of the intelligence and the ability to talk about the information that I know and the wisdom that I have, um, is different than maybe when I'm on a date. I'm, really more in my playful energy, or I am, I've taken some, I'm caring about my beauty, which that one goes, right, as I'm saying that, like, it's not just that we're going to care about that on a date, but just recognizing like we can be all of these things, and we're going to access these different parts of us in different ways and in different environments, right? But as a whole person, we have all those different layers and flavors. And so, really recognizing if I'm in that thought process that I can only have one thing and not the other, right? And so, that's a pattern we notice in how we're thinking, um, that we can have both. And so, coming to the last one, number 15 is how comfortable we are with money and financial literacy. So, this is a really big one, and not something I actually usually teach a lot on, something I'm still working through myself, where really recognizing that. As women, we haven't had a lot of history of having our own money. And, even within my mother's generation, then, I think it was the 70s when women were able to start getting their own loans or their own signing for their own money or credit card, right? And so that was something we historically needed a man to do. And so there's still a lot of unfamiliarity and wounding around that, and knowing how to manage our money, how to make money, how to even charge for things that uh, the services that we're providing, or negotiating our salary, um, just really how um, our knowledge and comfortability with money is. And so that is another one that shows up a lot. And as we have really, right, forged through the workforce, there are plenty of women who have money and are making money. They know about this, where it will continue to show up. I've had the opportunity to speak with women of all different socioeconomic statuses. So whether they're not making their own money and they're in a low income, or they are super successful in their business or career and they're making millions of dollars, this is something that comes up. And so just recognizing how this shows up for you, whether it's about being able to make and charge for your services, be able to make the money, or even being able to hold the money and not be spending it all. This is the last one that I wanted to bring to you today. And so just really, this was a lot. There was, we went through 15 different things. And so just take in what I shared, leave what doesn't resonate, take what does, and maybe pick out, the top, couple, two or three that are affecting you the most right now, and start with working on those. Start with assessing and just looking at how are these showing up in your life? How are these affecting you? And your work, your family, and go from there. And this is something that I definitely work with clients on more, more significant or extensively, and to be able to really overcome some of these things. And, as you're growing and changing whatever season of life you're in, that you can um, really start working with these. So if that's something you want to dive deeper in, I really encourage you to reach out. I invite you to come to my masterclass that I'm having on Friday, October 3rd. I'm going to be talking about my Rise in Radiance framework, and all of these things that I'm talking about are relevant and are infused into the framework that I'm giving you, so that you can start overcoming whichever one of these that are really getting in the way of you and your success and your fulfillment of your life. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please give this a like if you did. And if you'd like to see more content similar to this and want to feel empowered as a woman, and I invite you to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.